Have you ever met someone who seemed to just appear at the right moment in your life? Someone who, for no particular reason, changed everything in an instant? That's the kind of stranger that walked into the life of our main character today. But what if I told you that this stranger wasn't just some passerby? What if the person you least expected, someone completely out of your league, held the key to unlocking everything you ever wanted? It's a shocking twist that not only turned a struggling artist's life upside down but changed the way we look at fate and chance forever. Stay with me as I take you on a journey you'll never forget, one that's filled with suspense, mystery, and unexpected turns. You're going to want to hear every detail because trust me, the ending will leave you in disbelief. In a cramped little studio on the edge of town, struggling to make ends meet, our artist had spent years trying to find recognition. Day in and day out, he poured his heart into his paintings, each one filled with his dreams, his pain, and his endless pursuit of meaning. But despite his talent, no one seemed to care. Galleries rejected him, critics ignored him, and no one seemed to understand the magic he believed was hidden in his art. The bills piled up, and the stress of surviving in the chaotic, competitive world of art made him question whether it was all worth it. What could one person, one struggling artist, ever hope to accomplish when the world seemed determined to tell him he wasn't enough? But then, on a cold winter's evening, just as he was about to call it quits, everything changed. A man walked into his life. An ordinary man, dressed in nothing special, blending in with the crowd. But there was something about him. Something mysterious. It was almost as if this stranger had stepped out of nowhere, like he was meant to be there, in that exact moment. You've probably heard stories about random encounters that led to life-changing events. But what happened next? I promise you, this one is different from anything you've ever heard before. You see, the artist was just finishing up a piece he'd been working on for days, barely able to afford the supplies. He didn't expect anyone to buy it. He didn't even expect anyone to notice. But when this stranger walked into his studio, everything changed. The stranger didn't just look at the painting. He saw something in it, something that no one else had seen. A connection, maybe even a spark. A moment of recognition, as if the painting spoke to him. And so, without a second thought, the man made an offer. An offer that would have seemed completely insane if anyone had been watching. But to the artist, it felt like a dream come true. The stranger wanted to buy the painting. Not only that, he was willing to pay a sum that was more money than the artist had ever imagined he could make in his entire life. The man seemed sincere, like he'd been searching for this piece his whole life. The artist's heart raced with excitement, his mind spinning in disbelief. It was as if the universe had finally thrown him a lifeline, and he couldn't hold on tight enough. But here's where the story takes a bizarre turn. The stranger didn't stop at just buying the painting. No, he wanted to get to know the artist, to learn more about him, about his process, his struggles, his life. He invited him to dinner, and that's when the true mystery began to unfold. Imagine being in the artist's shoes for a second. You've just met someone who has not only recognized your talent, but also seemed to understand the very essence of who you are. That kind of attention is rare, especially for someone who has spent their life being overlooked. So, when the stranger invited him to dinner, the artist didn't hesitate. He accepted, eager to learn more, to connect with this strange, charismatic man who seemed to know exactly what he was doing. And it was at that dinner, over a glass of wine and a shared meal, that the stranger revealed something that would blow the artist's mind, and forever change his understanding of who this man truly was. As they talked, the stranger casually mentioned that he was a collector, but not just any collector. He was a millionaire collector, someone whose wealth and connections spanned continents, who had acquired some of the most coveted works of art in the world. At first, the artist thought he was joking. He assumed this was just another story, another oddball character trying to impress him. But the more the stranger spoke, the more he realized this man was dead serious. This wasn't just any collector. This was a powerful collector. The kind of person whose endorsement could elevate an artist from obscurity to superstardom in the blink of an eye. The kind of person who could turn a struggling artist's painting into $1 million masterpiece, with just a single phone call. But here's where the story gets even stranger. As the conversation deepened, the artist began to sense that there was more to the stranger than what he was letting on. There was a secret, something hidden beneath the surface, something this man was reluctant to reveal. It was almost as if the stranger was holding back, carefully choosing what to share and what to keep hidden. This left the artist with a burning question. Why did this man choose him? Why did this stranger, this millionaire collector, see something in his work that no one else had. What was it about the artist's painting that made him so valuable in the eyes of someone so powerful, so influential? The answer seemed to hover just out of reach, like a puzzle waiting to be solved. And that's the mystery I want you to dive into with me today. What happens when a struggling artist finds himself in the presence of someone who could change everything for him? What secrets lie hidden beneath the surface of this unexpected encounter? And most importantly, what will happen when the artist uncovers the true identity of the stranger who, for reasons he can't yet understand, seems to have set him on a path that could lead to unimaginable success, or terrifying consequences? I know you're sitting there, wondering what happens next. Well, I promise you, I'm about to reveal it all. But before we go any further, I want you to think about something. Have you ever had a moment in your life where you just knew something was about to change? That feeling of anticipation, of knowing that the universe is about to shift in your favor. If you're just brave enough to take that next step, well, this is one of those moments. And trust me, what happens next will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about fate, luck, and success. Stay with me, because the answer to this mystery is closer than you think. And I promise you, what you're about to discover will blow your mind. It's a story you won't be able to forget, and it all starts with a single painting, a stranger, and a life-changing twist you never saw coming. So let's dive into the story of how one man's art changed everything. You're about to find out just how a simple painting can lead to a life-altering revelation. And remember, keep watching, because the ending will leave you questioning everything. You don't want to miss what comes next. Stay tuned, the mystery is just beginning. The days that followed that unforgettable dinner felt like a blur to the artist, who now found himself teetering between two realities. One where he was still the same man scraping together rent and ramen money, and another where this strange new presence in his life had opened a door he wasn't even sure he was ready to walk through. His mind kept returning to the stranger's words, replaying every sentence, every glance, trying to find hidden meanings in things that had once felt casual. There was something haunting in the way the man had spoken about art, as if he wasn't just collecting pieces for pleasure, but for something bigger. It wasn't just appreciation. It was obsession. And though the collector never said it directly, the artist could feel it. He was being studied, watched, maybe even tested. There were layers to this man, layers that didn't add up, and as the days passed, that gut feeling only grew stronger. He tried to shake it off, to focus on his painting, but even that felt different now. Every brushstroke felt heavier, more meaningful, like he was being judged not just for what he painted, but why. What made things more confusing was how quickly things started changing in his day-to-day life. For the first time ever, people began noticing his work. Not just noticing, praising. Comments flooded his social media after the collector reposted one of his paintings on a luxury art page, tagging him with a casual caption. True genius in raw form. The post blew up overnight, bringing a flood of new followers, DMs from other collectors, even small-time galleries requesting to meet. The exposure felt surreal. He hadn't done anything differently. He hadn't painted better, or smarter, or faster. The only thing that had changed was that one man had looked at his work and declared it valuable. And just like that, the world agreed. It was flattering. It was thrilling. And it was terrifying. Because deep down, he knew it wasn't real, at least not the way he had imagined success. This wasn't the result of years of hard work finally being seen. This was something else. This was influence. And influence, like anything else that comes too quickly, had a price. But as the artist's public image grew, so did his private unease. The collector became more involved in his life, showing up unannounced at the studio, offering unsolicited advice, suggesting subtle improvements to his style. Always phrased politely, but loaded with the weight of expectation. He began to suggest themes, color palettes, even moods. At first, the artist pushed back, insisting he needed to stay true to his own voice. But the collector had a way of twisting the conversation, making him feel like it was his idea to change. And so slowly, almost imperceptibly, his work began to shift. The wild, chaotic energy that once made his paintings feel alive began to flatten into more controlled, marketable images. They were beautiful. They sold quickly. But they weren't him. And the strangest part was that the collector always knew when the authenticity started to fade. He would tilt his head at a piece and smile politely, and the artist would feel the shame hit like a wave. At the same time, another thread began to weave its way into the story. Something that, at first, the artist didn't fully grasp. a young woman named Harper began frequenting the same cafe he often retreated to when he needed to think. She was sharp, confident, and wore her curiosity like armor. She struck up a conversation one afternoon after noticing a sketchbook tucked under his arm, and it wasn't long before they were meeting regularly, sharing thoughts on art, life, and everything in between. Unlike the collector, Harper didn't flatter him or shower him with praise. She asked questions that made him uncomfortable, questions that dug deeper than just technique or surface-level themes. "Do you still love what you make?" she asked one evening, looking him straight in the eye. The question sat with him long after she left, echoing in his mind like a warning. And then, there was the moment he stumbled upon something he wasn't meant to see. He had been invited to a private event hosted by the collector. An elite gathering in a penthouse filled with wealthy art investors, socialites, and influencers. It was all glitz and glam, champagne glasses clinking beneath modern chandeliers, people smiling through their teeth as they exchanged million-dollar deals in casual conversation. But toward the end of the night, after most guests had left, the artist wandered into a side room lined with paintings. His paintings. Not just the ones he'd sold to the collector, but earlier ones he had never shown to anyone, that he had tucked away in his old sketchbooks. Somehow the collector had them. Copies? Originals? He couldn't tell. But each was labeled, catalogued, valued with numbers that made his head spin. The collector hadn't just bought his art. He had studied him, archived him, predicted his evolution. It was as if the collector had been watching him for far longer than he let on. That night, the artist couldn't sleep. His mind was a storm of questions, doubts, and fear. He remembered something Harper had said once, during one of their long walks. "Not everyone who discovers you wants to help you. Some just want to own a piece of you." The words rang louder now than ever before. He had given this man access to his mind, his creative soul, and now he was beginning to suspect that the collector's interest wasn't admiration. It was control. Every move, every compliment, every opportunity. It had all been part of a larger game. But why? What did the collector really want? Was he simply obsessed with art, or was there something deeper, more twisted beneath his polished exterior? Meanwhile, another layer of the mystery began to unfold when Harper decided to do some digging of her own. She didn't trust the collector, and her instincts told her something was off. Late nights at the library, anonymous forums, and even a few whispered conversations with other artists revealed a pattern. Young, unknown talents who rose fast under the collector's wing and then vanished. Some moved abroad, some stopped producing art entirely, and a few had gone completely off the grid. No interviews, no shows, not even a post on social media. It was as if they had been erased. When Harper brought this up to the artist, he felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard of a few of those names. He had admired them. And now, realizing they had once been exactly where he stood now, under the spotlight of a powerful patron, he began to fear what might lie ahead. The deeper they looked, the stranger it all became. There were rumors of an underground vault, a private collection where the collector kept works that were never shown to the public. Pieces too personal, too dangerous, too real. And there were whispers, only whispers, of a contract. A deal each artist had unknowingly signed, hidden in the fine print of their first sale. A deal that said once your art became part of the collection, you became part of it too. And that's where we'll leave it, for now. Because what happens next, what the artist finds when he finally confronts the man who gave him everything, is something you have to see to believe. The real reason the collector chose him, the secret behind the vault, and the truth about the price of success. It's all coming. But remember, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So stay tuned, because the next chapter is where everything changes, and you won't want to miss a single second. Do you think you'd recognize a trap if it came wrapped as a dream? Keep watching. The answer is closer than you think. It was nearly midnight when the artist found himself staring at the ceiling of his tiny studio apartment, heart pounding, palms slick with sweat. The walls felt closer now, like they were leaning in, like even the air was watching him. He hadn't touched a brush in days. Something inside him refused to create. Every time he tried, his hand trembled, and his mind went blank. He kept thinking about the vault Harper had mentioned, about those missing artists and how easily their names had slipped through the cracks of the art world. If he vanished tomorrow, who would remember him? Just a blip on a collector's resume. He hadn't said a word to the collector since the night of the party, hadn't returned the man's calls or replied to his cryptic texts. But silence wasn't enough. He needed answers. Real ones. And if Harper was right, then whatever was happening wasn't just about art anymore. It was about control, identity, and maybe something far more dangerous than either of them realized. The turning point came when a small package arrived at his door without a return address. Inside was an envelope containing a single photo. It was grainy and looked like it had been taken in secret, from a distance. But it was clear enough. The image showed the artist in his studio. Months ago, before he met the collector, bent over a canvas, completely unaware he was being watched. The angle wasn't from the window or door. It was from inside the studio. And that's when the realization hit like a slap to the chest. Someone had been watching him long before the collector ever walked into his life. This wasn't fate. This wasn't luck. This had been orchestrated. And now everything he thought was coincidence, the timing, the interest, the praise, felt like a carefully designed trap. The collector hadn't discovered him. He had selected him. For what? The artist didn't know. But he was done being silent. Fueled by a mix of fear and rage, he reached out to Harper. They met in a dimly lit parking garage under the pretense of avoiding cameras, both of them now convinced they were being followed. Harper had managed to get her hands on a set of files from a disgruntled gallery assistant who had worked under the collector briefly before being let go. The assistant, in a paranoid string of messages, warned that the collector wasn't just a wealthy patron. He was part of something much bigger, something hidden in plain sight. According to the files, the collector's network stretched far beyond the art world, into private tech firms, behavioral research labs, and even hush-hush psychological operations. It seemed absurd, until the artist recalled something the collector had once mentioned in passing. Art isn't just expression. It's influence. The right image in the right moment can shift the way people see the world. Back then it sounded poetic. Now it sounded like a threat. But the twist that shattered what little sense of control the artist still had came the next morning. While scanning the files, Harper came across a section labeled Version Catalog. Confused, she clicked it open, only to find folders filled with images of the artist's paintings, altered slightly in each version. Some had color changes. Others had elements removed or added, subtle, imperceptible tweaks that changed the emotional weight of the piece. And these versions weren't just concepts. They had dates, gallery placements, private buyers, metadata tracking how long viewers looked at them on screen. These weren't just art pieces. They were experiments. Controlled, measured, tested. The artist had unknowingly become part of a psychological study. His work had been used to gauge emotional responses, test consumer influence, even manipulate political opinions. Each brushstroke he had thought was a cry for help had been re-engineered as a tool for control. His entire sense of identity cracked open in that moment. Everything he had sacrificed for, his struggle, his hunger, his passion, it had all been co-opted into something clinical, something sterile and strategic. He wasn't just being watched. He was being used. And worst of all, his voice, the one thing he thought was still his, had been repurposed to tell a story that wasn't his own. That's when Harper delivered the final gut punch. There was another folder. One with his name on it. And inside were images he had never painted. Yet they looked exactly like his work. Same strokes, same style. Only these images were dated in the future. Scheduled releases. Market forecasts. Gallery debuts. The collector had mapped out his entire artistic future. Planned every success, every trend he'd supposedly pioneer. They weren't nurturing his talent. They were scripting his legacy. Suddenly, everything made sense, and it terrified him. He wasn't the first. He wouldn't be the last. He was part of a formula. A product. But here's where things get truly disturbing. In one of the collector's audio notes buried in the files, recorded in a hushed, cold tone, he said something that neither of them could stop thinking about. Asterisk, most artists create because they need to be seen. We give them that. And in return they give us everything. Asterisk, that line haunted the artist. Because he had given everything. And he wasn't even sure what he had left. With that revelation came a desperate plan. He needed to confront the collector. Not in public, not with cameras or fanfare, but directly, alone. He needed to see the vault with his own eyes. He needed to know just how deep this rabbit hole went. But Harper, ever the pragmatist, warned him that there might be no coming back. If you go there, she said, you better be ready to find something you can't unsee. Still, he couldn't shake the need to finish what had started the moment that stranger walked into his studio. And so, under the cover of darkness, with only a burner phone and a backpack full of copied files, the artist made his way to the collector's private estate. An isolated property deep in the hills, shielded by trees, silence, and secrets. He stood outside the gates for a long time, staring up at the mansion that had once seemed so luxurious, and now felt like a tomb. He rang the bell, heart racing. A voice answered, smooth and familiar. "I was wondering when you'd come. What happens inside those walls will change everything. And I promise you, the truth waiting behind those locked doors is more disturbing, more unbelievable, and more real than anything you could have imagined." The doors to the mansion opened before he could even knock. It was as if the collector had been waiting, always anticipating this moment, this confrontation. The artist stepped inside, his breath shallow, his mind swirling with the weight of everything that had brought him here. The house smelled of expensive wood, polished surfaces, and old memories. As the door closed behind him, the sense of isolation hit him like a wave. He was trapped. And yet, there was a strange calm settling over him. This was it. The moment that would either break him or set him free. The collector was sitting in a dimly lit study, surrounded by his familiar collection of high-end art and rare antiques. But it wasn't the paintings that caught the artist's attention this time. It was the walls. The walls themselves were covered in monitors, each screen displaying a different piece of his art, running in a loop, analyzed, recontextualized. Every painting he had ever done, altered and manipulated by the collector's influence, had now become part of a calculated display of control. The collector had turned his soul into an exhibit, something to be observed, curated, and ultimately owned. "Do you like what I've done with it?" The collector's voice was smooth, like he was speaking to a colleague, not a subject. "You've been very cooperative, you know. Your creativity, it's magnificent. But what you don't understand is that it's only valuable when it's understood. And I've spent years understanding you." The artist felt a coldness creeping up his spine. "You've been watching me this whole time," he said, his voice almost a whisper, the weight of the realization settling on his chest like a heavy stone. The collector simply nodded. "You were never just an artist, my friend. You were always a variable in a much larger equation." The artist's heart thudded in his chest. "You've been manipulating my work for months. Everything I've made, every brushstroke, it's been part of your plan. But I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be your puppet." His anger surged, but the collector remained unfazed. "You didn't ask. No. But that's the beauty of it. You didn't have to. You see, every great artist wants to be seen. They need it. The trick is knowing how to give them what they need without them realizing it. That's where I come in. I've given you everything you could ever want. Exposure, praise, success. I've made you valuable. But now it's time for the next phase." The artist was still shaking, but there was a sense of clarity in his mind now. "What is the next phase? What are you doing to me? To all of us?" The collector's eyes gleamed, a smile playing at the corner of his lips. "It's simple. I'm giving you a legacy. Your art is going to change the world. I've made sure of it. You will be remembered, not just as an artist, but as an icon. But not by your rules. By mine." The artist felt the walls close in. It was suffocating, the realization that his entire career had been constructed from someone else's blueprint. He wasn't a revolutionary artist anymore. He wasn't a voice for change. He was a cog in the collector's machine, a carefully curated piece in a larger art world narrative that the collector controlled with precision. His work, his soul, had been stolen and repurposed. And the worst part? He had let it happen. But something shifted in that moment. A spark of defiance, long buried under fear and uncertainty, ignited. The artist realized he still had something the collector didn't. His ability to create freely. The collector had controlled every aspect of his career, manipulated his path, but he had never been able to control his mind. The artist was still capable of creating something unexpected, something that wasn't part of the plan. "I'll never be your puppet," the artist said, his voice steady. "Not anymore." The collector's smile faltered. Just for a second. "What are you talking about?" he asked, almost amused. "You've been given everything. You can't walk away from this. You're too deep in." But the artist wasn't listening. His hand reached for a blank canvas nearby, A canvas the collector had set up just for him, ready to be painted on. But this time, the artist didn't follow the color schemes the collector had suggested. He didn't follow the themes. He didn't follow the rules. He painted something raw, something true. His own pain, his own fear, his own voice. It was chaotic, messy, and completely unrefined. It was everything the collector hated. But it was his. The moment the brush touched the canvas, the entire room seemed to freeze. The collector's eyes widened in disbelief. What is this? This isn't art. This is nothing. But the artist just smiled, looking up from his work. This is me. And I don't belong to you. Not anymore. The room seemed to pulse with tension, and for the first time, the artist didn't feel trapped. The collector's power, his control, began to lose its hold. The walls of the mansion, once oppressive, seemed to recede. The cameras on the walls flickered, as if they were suddenly uncertain of their purpose. And for the first time the artist felt free. As the collector moved toward him, a final desperate attempt to reclaim control, the artist stepped back, his painting unfinished but a statement in itself. The collector's face twisted in fury. You can't just walk away. You've already made your choice. I own you, your work, your future. Asterisk everything asterisk. But the artist stood tall, knowing that the collector had underestimated him. You may own my past, he said, but you will never own my future. I create what I want. No one else gets to decide that. And with that, the collector's grip shattered. The artist had won, not just over the collector, but over his own fear, his self-doubt, his sense of worth. He didn't need the validation of the art world, or the fame, or the money. All he needed was the ability to create freely. The mansion, the collector, the carefully constructed empire, all of it faded away, leaving nothing but the artist and his canvas. In the end, the artist returned to his small studio, the one he had started in. But this time, when he picked up his paintbrush, it felt different. His work didn't have to be for anyone else. It didn't have to be controlled, analyzed, or judged. It was his. It was art. And that, in the end, was the most powerful thing of all. The collector was left behind in his empty mansion, his empire crumbling, his influence exposed for the hollow facade it had always been. But the artist? He had found himself. And in doing so, he had broken free. It's a story of creation, control, and reclaiming one's voice in a world that constantly tries to silence it. A reminder that no matter how dark things may seem, the true power always lies within us to rewrite our own story. So, as you walk away from this, remember, you are more than what others expect of you. Don't let anyone own your art, or your soul. Create freely, live fully, and never let go of who you truly are. Don't blink. The real story is just about to begin.